There's a character in this story who has already died once. Frodo Balrog, and it's not Gandalf, lost, got sent back to Middle-earth by literal divine intervention, and then, centuries later, single-handedly holds off all 9 ring wraiths at a river crossing so a dying hobbit can escape. That's not a minor character. That's one of the coolest things that happens in the entire book, and he's not in the movies at all. Not a cameo, not a name drop, not so much as a background extra with pointy ears standing near the water. Cut completely, and quietly swapped out for someone else on a horse who never fought a Balrog in her life. What I actually want to get into is the stuff that doesn't just trim the story down to fit a runtime. The changes that replace what happened with something else built for a different medium, told in a different order, sometimes meaning something different entirely. Some of these are small enough that only the people who have read the appendices twice will clock them. A couple of them, I'd argue, change what the story's even about. So let's get into it. Before we get into the video, if you enjoy the content, please subscribe, as it really helps smaller channels like this one. Thank you. The 17 years nobody films. In the book, Bilbo's birthday party, the one where he vanishes with the ring, happens when Frodo is 33, which is technically the Hobbit age of majority. Hobbits come of age at 33, not 18 or 21. Frodo doesn't actually leave Bag End until 17 years later, at age 50. Gandalf disappears for most of that time doing his own research into the ring's nature, and when he finally comes back with confirmation, there's still a further delay before Frodo departs. Long enough that the sale of Bag End to the Sackville Bagginses and the whole business of settling affairs happens at a leisurely pace. In the film, for obvious reasons, nobody wants to watch Elijah Wood, age 17 years, and tend to his errands. It collapses this into what plays as weeks, maybe less. Frodo gets the news and basically bolts. This single compression is the domino that knocks over almost everything else in Act 1. Tom Bombadil and the Old Forest cut. In the book, the hobbits flee into the Old Forest to dodge the Black Riders on the road, and nearly get eaten by Old Man Willow, and are then rescued by Bombadil, a genuinely ancient and cosmologically weird figure whom even Elrond later says is outside the reckoning of the ring's power entirely. The ring has no effect on him, and he can see Frodo even when Frodo's wearing it. Gone from the film completely, not even a nod in the extended edition. The Barrow-downs also cut. This is the one people miss the consequence of. So in the book, it's here that the hobbits get their swords, ancient blades from a Barrow horde, gifted to them by Bombadil after he rescues them from a wight. One of these blades is the one Merry later uses to stab the Witch King in the leg at the Battle of the Pelennor Fields in The Return of the King. A blade forged specifically with spells to harm the Witch King's kind, which is why it works when ordinary steel wouldn't. The movie needed a different explanation for how Merry's sword does that, and mostly it just doesn't even explain it. And Farmer Maggot, downgraded hard. Movie Maggot exists purely so Merry and Pippin can steal carrots and then get chased through a field, which is fine, but the book Maggot is a genuinely important minor character. He actively dislikes and distrusts Bilbo's old family history with the ring, and he's already had a Black Rider come asking after baggings at his door, and he lied to protect Frodo, and he personally drives the hobbits to the Buckleberry Ferry in his cart to get them clear of danger. So he's an ally, not a punchline. Fatty Bolger doesn't exist in the film at all. In the book, part of the conspiracy, and more on that in a second, is that a fourth hobbit, Fradiger Fatty Bolger, stays behind at Crick Hollow specifically to keep the lights on and make it look like Frodo is still living there, to buy the real party time. He gets discovered and has to flee when the riders eventually raid the house. Entire subplot just gone. The conspiracy. This chapter tells you everything about how differently the movie treats Merry and Pippin. Chapter 5 of Fellowship is literally called Conspiracy Unmasked. And what gets unmasked is that Merry and Pippin already know. Merry has known about the ring for years. He saw Bilbo disappear with the help of the ring, and then he sneakily read Bilbo's books, learned further details from Frodo's and Gandalf's conversation. Even prior to the departure, he arranged the ponies and he was plotting the escape route through the Old Forest specifically because it's the one route the Black Riders won't expect. So when Frodo finally admits he has to leave the Shire, Merry's relieved that Frodo finally stopped stalling. And Movie Merry and Movie Pippin meet Frodo for the first time on screen by literally crashing into him while fleeing a farmer over stolen vegetables. It is also almost the exact opposite characterization from the source material. Competent, loyal conspirators traded for slapstick. Sam gets a version of the same downgrade, but just slightly gentler. Buck Sam quotes a verse unprompted, has a real interest in Elvish history and lore before he's even left the Shire. He pesters Bilbo for old stories constantly. And Gandalf specifically assigns him to the quest as a punishment/reward for eavesdropping. A scene the film cuts, replacing it with Sam getting caught by Gandalf gardening outside the window, eavesdropping a little bit, and then just coming along. Movie Sam's loyalty is still the emotional backbone of the story, so that doesn't change, and honestly, it gets even more weight in the films, if anything. But the specific flavor of Gardener, who's secretly a bit of a scholar and a poet, mostly doesn't survive. A king who doubts himself. If there is one invention in the film that I'd defend as an improvement, and I don't say that lightly, it's this one. Book Aragorn has no arc about his own worthiness. He knows exactly who he is. Heir of Isildur, the line of kings of Gondor and Arnor, and he spent decades as a ranger, specifically preparing for the moment he can claim that inheritance. He's confident and a bit intimidating as a character on the page. There is no, I don't fear death, but I fear failure, internal crisis. Aragorn's arc across the trilogy is about patience and timing, not self-doubt. And movie Aragorn is haunted, specifically by Isildur, by the idea that his ancestor held the ring in his hand and chose not to destroy it, and that the same weakness might run in his blood. That is a Jackson-era invention. The Council of Elrond. The Council of Elrond in the book is enormous. It's one of the longest chapters in the whole novel, and it functions as a great way to explain the backstory and to clarify many of the questions that by then the readers would have. In the space of this one chapter, we get the full history of the ring's forging, Gandalf's account of his imprisonment atop Orthanc by Saruman, and told entirely in retrospective dialogue. We never see it happen, it's just recounted after the fact. Boromir recounting a prophetic dream that sent him from Gondor. Glóin representing dwarven concerns after messengers from Mordor came asking the dwarves about the ring. And it also elaborates on what Gandalf learned from Gollum. The film compresses all of that into maybe 10 minutes of screen time and, crucially, shows some of it instead of narrating it. Gandalf's confrontation and imprisonment by Saruman becomes an actual physical fight sequence with a staff duel, which never happens on the page at all. It's efficient filmmaking. It's also a fundamentally different kind of storytelling. The book's counsel is about the weight of history and competing political interests converging on one small object. The film's version is mostly about getting the plot moving. And there is one casualty in all of this. Glóin, Gimli's father, barely registers in the film's version of the scene, which flattens the dwarves' whole political stake in the story. Because in the book, the dwarves are actively worried Sauron's forces are hunting for them too, which is part of why Gimli joins the Fellowship at all, not just family loyalty to Frodo. Elrond's actual closing argument also changes in tone. Book Elrond lays out options and lets the company argue it out at length. Several different plans get proposed and shot down. Movie Elrond gets one of Jackson's better original lines, the blunt, "You have only one choice," which is more dramatically efficient, but sands off the book's sense that this was a contested, deliberated decision. Arwen in, Glorfindel out. Here's a swap that gets discussed a lot, but usually without the specific detail that makes it more interesting. So at the ford of Brunnen, Frodo, badly wounded, half in the Wraith world from the Morgul blade, is saved not by Arwen in the book, but by Glorfindel, an elf lord of Rivendell who is one of the more cosmologically heavy characters in the whole legendarium. A first-age hero of Gondolin, who died fighting a Balrog and was later re-embodied and sent back to Middle-earth by the Valar. Very cool story, made a video on him and I'll link it down below. Tolkien doesn't dwell on that backstory in Fellowship itself, but it's there for anyone who goes looking. And it's part of why Glorfindel is one of the only beings capable of standing up to all 9 Nazgul at once, at the ford without flinching. His horse, Asfaloth, is the one who actually outruns the riders. But the film needed to establish Arwen as a real character early, since her romance with Aragorn, drawn mostly from material tucked away in the appendices, specifically the tale of Aragorn and Arwen. It needed this screen time somewhere in the trilogy, and Fellowship was the logical place to plant it. So when Arwen takes Glorfindel's role at the ford wholesale, she's the one who finds Frodo, gets him on the horse, and outrides the Nazgul to Rivendell. Glorfindel doesn't appear in the trilogy at all. The small cuts that add up. Okay, and here I'm gonna just list the stuff that never really gets its own headline anywhere, but it really changes the texture if you're paying attention. Gandalf's delayed letter. Book only plot point. Gandalf leaves the letter for Frodo with Batterbur at the Prancing Pony, explaining the delay in confirming Aragorn/Strider is trustworthy. Except, Batterbur forgets to send it, and it only reaches Frodo late, causing a chunk of unnecessary tension in Bree. The film replaces this entirely, with Gandalf simply being imprisoned by Saruman and unable to make contact, which is tidier, but somehow removes a very human, almost comic point of failure. A barkeep just keep forgetting. The Prancing Pony vanishing act. Both versions have Frodo accidentally slipping the ring on in front of the whole inn, but the mechanism's different. In the book, Frodo trips over Sam's foot mid-song, and the ring goes on by accident. Movie Frodo bumps into someone and it happens more ambiguously. Another one is that Boromir's death is not in this book at all. This one trips people up. The breaking of the Fellowship is the final chapter of the Fellowship of the Ring novel, and Boromir's death is not shown there. It's recounted at the start of The Two Towers, in the chapter The Departure of Boromir, from Aragorn's point of view after the fact. The film moves it to the end of the first movie for a clean, emotional climax, which, again, is defensible filmmaking. But it means the book and the film versions of Fellowship don't even end on the same event. The Book of Mazarbul. In the book, the company finds and reads a genuinely haunting, fragmentary account of Balin's colony's last days, written by the dwarves themselves as they were being overrun. It's a very devastating piece of writing, and the film shows the book, but it doesn't dramatize its contents in anywhere near the same depth. Galadriel's gifts. The book has an entire extended sequence of Galadriel giving out individually meaningful farewell gifts to each member of the Fellowship. Sam gets a box of soil from her orchard, which becomes hugely important for the Shire's recovery in the Scouring chapters later. Gimli famously asks for and receives a single strand of her hair. The theatrical cut trims this way down. Some of it survives in the extended edition, but even that doesn't cover everyone. So go back to where we started. An elf lord who came back from the dead who single-handedly held the line against 9 ring wraiths. Just written out, replaced by someone else entirely. And that's before you even get to Bombadil, or the conspiracy that wasn't a conspiracy on screen. or the letter that never gets delayed. None of that is the movie just getting it wrong. It's the movie deciding, scene by scene, what this story is actually for, where the emotional weight needs to land, who the audience needs to be watching in a given moment, and what can be shown instead of told when you've only got 3 hours instead of 1,000 pages. Sometimes that means erasing a first age hero. Sometimes it means quietly moving a piece of history around so a different character gets the moment instead. Every swap we walked through today is really the same swap, made over and over. A story built to be read at your own pace, re-engineered into one built to be felt in a single sitting. I think they're built to do different jobs with the same bones. Anyway, that's the Fellowship. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much to my channel members, and I'll see you in the next one.